It is an all-out war. That's how Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan describes an invasion of the Golan Heights and the east bank of the Suez by Syria and Egypt.
Hi, I'm Huples Kittens, and welcome to the second of my Suppressed series on the Gaza crisis. I'm going to look at the political ramifications of the current Gaza crisis. Most, but not all, American Muslims voted for Biden in 2020. As a demographic, American Muslims remain one of the poorest demographics in America. Despite a lot of nonsense being said, there is no way the Muslim population in America will be anything other than a tiny minority by the time everybody watching this video dies. American Muslims remain one of the most diverse groups of religion in America. The largest minority diversity group inside of Muslims is American blacks. Globally, 25% of the world's population happen to believe in Muslim religions. But in the world, 1.9 billion people are Muslim. How many people are Jewish? 14.6 million, apparently. I find that very, very hard to believe, but that's what I came up with when I looked. So how is American full support of Israel playing domestically?
Adam Abusala worked on President Biden's 2020 campaign in Battleground, Michigan.
Yeah, I was working on Arab-American engagement, getting people out to vote for Biden.
So committed that his Palestinian-American parents put Biden 2020 on his birthday cake that year. But today, as President Biden shows unwavering support for Israel in the wake of Hamas's terror attack, Abusala says he's devastated.
Right now I have family in Palestine who's afraid for their lives, and Biden is doing nothing to stop it. I'm hurt for the betrayal that we feel from Biden, but I also feel like a little bit of guilt for what I've done.
Amid a humanitarian crisis and with the civilian death toll in Gaza rising, Muslim and Arab American community leaders warned the president's re-election support in Michigan could be in jeopardy.
They said that we had to save America from Donald Trump, and now we feel that we have to save Palestine from Joe Biden.
More than 300,000 Americans from the Middle East call Michigan home, a state President Biden flipped in 2020 after Donald Trump won in 2016 by just 11,000 votes. And although not all Arab Americans are Muslim, an exit poll from the Council on American-Islamic Relations showed nearly 70% of American Muslims backed Biden.
That's 69% of American Muslims who voted for Biden are unlikely to do so in the 2024 election the way things are going. America is clearly arming and protecting and enabling Israel to do stuff that a lot of people have fundamental problems with. I hope none of my viewers are buying Biden's take on this. His actions throughout this crisis have not spoken about peace or reconciliation. Quite the opposite.
We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity.
Ohio-class submarine that can be equipped with advanced ballistic or Tomahawk cruise missiles has arrived in the Mediterranean. The move comes as U.S. continues to bolster its military resources in the region amid the Israel-Hamas war. President Joe Biden is asking Americans to spend billions more dollars to help Israel fight Hamas.
Turning now to Gander, Canada, thanks to GBL Homestead and the links in the description, what's actually going on?
And here it goes, folks. Air traffic control just gave the okay.
So America is complicit in what Israel's doing, rightly or wrongly, depending on your point of view. But so is Canada. Silently, Canada is also complicit in enabling America to enable Israel's actions.
This is the U.S. Air Force, a big old jet here heading off to Israel. And it's here in Gander. I'll show you the Gander airport. One of these a day now for the last few days have been stopping over here to refuel here in Gander, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, heading to Israel, as I said, to help out in the war with the Allies. So that's actually, like I said, a very different video from Mr. Gary, just showing you this aircraft is probably full of supplies and American soldiers, as I said, heading to the Middle East and to Israel.
So Biden's probably going to lose the 2024 election purely based upon what's happening in Gaza. You may or may not have believed he would win or lose. Anyway, it's somewhat irrelevant to this video, so don't waste time talking about it. But what is sure is if Biden wanted to be re-elected, he's not doing what he should do for that domestically. It's almost like he doesn't think there'll be a 2024 election. Think about that.
Would you support his re-election?
No. I've already made the decision, and we are not going to endorse him. in the paper, it's not only disregard to our lives, our livelihood. It's more than disrespecting me, disregarding my life. And while we see, the kids, our kids and our families are being torn apart overseas, we're being threatened here.
A large number of our news media and commentators and even politicians have stirred up hate. Hate which both the Jewish and the Palestinian peoples of America and Canada are experiencing. This video clip's from the Toronto area.
Trillium Health Partners confirming one of their Jewish physicians received a death threat off hospital premises, but it immediately increased security at its 2 hospitals in Mississauga and health center in Etobicoke as a result. Jewish advocacy organization Friends of Simon Wiesenthal calling the incident appalling.
So shocking to wake up this morning to that news, because we've seen an escalation over the last week in the type of incidents, hate incidents targeting the Jewish community.
It is an escalation from earlier this week when anti-Semitic graffiti was discovered in neighborhoods across Toronto. Police also say hateful remarks were made at a Jewish home and a mezuzah was stolen at another.
Who could have imagined that the upshot of the atrocities that we saw in Israel on October 7th would be a rise in anti-Semitism in Canada? It's such a disconnect. It makes no sense, but this is the reality that Canadian Jews are living with in our city and across Canada today.
It is the painful reality also being felt by Muslim communities.
It's really an untenable situation right now.
The National Council of Canadian Muslims tells us 60 Islamophobic incidents have been reported to them in Ontario since October 7th, particularly targeting women wearing hijabs.
We have multiple cases of them being spat on in public.
Uthman Quick tells us the heated debate at Queen's Park over the censuring of MPP Sarah Jama fueled division and tension when leaders should be lowering the temperature.
Leaders should be calling for calm, for peace, and really putting out balanced statements that acknowledge the suffering that has happened on both sides.
What is deeply shocking is some American politicians don't seem to see Palestinians as human beings.
I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
But Brian Mass is Republican. Surely the Democrats are better.
That's why I care. That's why this has got to end. And by the way, yes, they do. And the children of Israel matter. And the children of Israel matter, which has not come out of your mouth.
That was the news clip. The actual full confrontation is much more illuminating about Democratic point of view. It also shows this dude who wants to be President of the United States is a very inept communicator.
I don't understand how Hamas can be eradicated while we're watching thousands of children die. And then you can continue to say that without calling for a ceasefire. Over 3,000 children have died. Most of the casualties in Gaza right now are children and women. And so by you saying all that makes me think that it's a very flagrant way of you saying that you don't care that their lives matter. And that's my opinion. But it feels very disingenuous what you said. And I personally I'm willing to listen to you. Hopefully you can change your mind. Or
change my mind about what?
Just your position on Palestine. I would want you to call for a ceasefire. You haven't even been able to say the word tonight.
I'm calling for the elimination of a terrorist organization that just butchered 1,900 Israelis, including babies and children. And I'm also... Okay. I think it is sickening. I am sickened and disgusted, and I just told you... I am calling out the Israeli government. I'm calling... Look at no. That's what this. You guys. This is what America needs to do more of: face to face instead of through screens. Yeah, no. That's and I don't. No apology necessary. I think what you just said is true, right? Remember? No. Hey, yeah. Hey. Okay, everybody. Look at one. All I ask is just kindness and respect to one another. All of us. I respect you. I'm sorry. I'm being I what? I gaslit, really. I don't. Okay. Everybody, I respect you. Okay, embarrassing. And I care about every one of those lives, and I respect you. So let me answer your question about bombs and missiles. The bombs and missiles. I'm trying to answer another person's question. Please. I'm calling for the elimination of a terrorist organization that will. You're right. And that's why I care. That's why this has got to end. And by the way, yes, they do. And the children of Israel matter. And the children of Israel matter, which has not come out of your mouth.
Clearly, you cannot say that Palestinian lives matter, nor can she apparently say that Israeli lives matter. Both of them are radicalized.
Mr. President, if you care about Jewish people, as a rabbi, I need you to call for a ceasefire right now.
The President of the United States, Joe Biden, is also similarly radicalized. Despite what he's saying, it's what he's doing that makes it radical. And apparently so is some of his audience. The leader of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has sensibly decided to hide. I'm often told as a Canadian that America is a democracy. This poll was taken between the 18th and 19th of October. The majority of Americans want their government to go for a ceasefire. That is not being pushed. I do suspect if you do a poll now in the beginning of November, the actual number of Americans that want a ceasefire would be considerably higher than it was on the 18th and 19th of October. So is Hamas calming things? It's hard to tell because you don't really get as much exposure to Hamas's broadcast in the West as we probably should. After all, we are a non-combatant here, so we should be hearing both sides, right? However, it does look very much that Hamas wants the erasure, the total erasure of Israel from the Middle East. That is a political position. When it becomes an action, it becomes terrorism. The vast majority of people believe in partition, 2 states, Palestine, Israel, and neither of them oppressing or attacking the other.
اكتوبر في 10 اكتوبر في مليون اكتوبر احنا اللي بنعمل مبرر it is justified مبرره تكون طوفان الاقصى اول مره لا حتكون ثاني وثالث ورابعه لانه احنا لدينا اصرار ولدينا قرار ولدينا امكانيات ان نقاتل اي دوله لا مقام لها على ارضنا احنا الدوله لابد ان نزيلها لانه بالفعل هي تعتبر كارثه امنيه وعسكريه وسياسيه للامه العربيه والاسلاميه يجب ان تنتهي لذلك احنا لا نخجل من نقول ذلك بكل قوه انه صار لازم نأدبها وحنأدب.
So Hamas is promising the Al-Aqsa flood over and over. For those of you who don't know how corrupted our media is, have never heard the phrase Al-Aqsa flood, it's actually what the Arabs are calling what happened October 7th when they entered Israel en masse and slaughtered a whole bunch of innocent people and took hostages, none of which was appropriate, none of which was acceptable. But Israel wants to kill all of Hamas, rightly so you might argue, but the problem is most of Hamas isn't in Gaza. And in so doing, in so attempting to do this, they're going to fail, but they're going to kill an awful lot of very innocent people. This will inevitably recruit an awful lot more people to the Al-Aqsa flood cause. This will not generate peace for Palestine or for Israel, no matter what happens. Israel apparently is rejecting a ceasefire based upon the fact hostages are still being held by Hamas. That sounds kind of reasonable, but a ceasefire to allow the hostages to be freed, to me, sounds more reasonable. But it's also true that Israel's holding, and has held for years, people in indefinite detention without trial. It's also true that a number of those are children. If they're not going to have a ceasefire, and they really should release the children. It's a good gesture. And if it's not reciprocated, so what? You've still done the right thing.
So the Prime Minister's career is definitely in trouble. There is anger building against him every time he speaks to local press or foreign press. He's facing questions whether he should resign, whether he will accept responsibility for failing to anticipate the attacks of October 7th and failing to respond in a timely manner, because these attacks that took place on that day took place over the course of several hours, where Hamas was able to go from community to community, butchering people, taking hostages, and now some Israelis are saying that he is doing this campaign to both attack Hamas, but also to try and save his own political career, potentially at the expense of the hostages.
In Israel itself, there's a lot of dissent, and it's mainly not shown on our news. However, in the main, right now, most people in Israel accept what the IDF is having to do. I would argue that most people outside of Israel, most Jewish people outside of Israel, fundamentally disagree with that.
Israel doesn't want to compromise on security. They have to do a blockade. They have to kind of cut this off. It's, you know, it's ridiculous what people have to go through there, but it's also ridiculous what we have to do to keep ourselves safe.
We don't want to fight with them. But if they ask for it, they will get it. And we're much stronger, much stronger. We behave very gently and morally, very gently with them.
It could get a lot worse, is what you're saying.
If the Russians was here, 2 days, they will kill all of them. If the American will be here, they will kill them 2 days. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about nothing.
Israel's holding back.
Very, very.
But it's war, and civilians get killed in war, and it's a horrible, you know, on their side, less on our side, but at the same time, we put money into protecting ourselves.
Of course, inside the Gaza Strip, people aren't demonstrating against the Hamas organisation because they would be murdered. This does not justify killing a lot of them to make them, quote, free. We look at the West Bank and we don't see a free Arabic Palestine, do we? But when you see an entire people as unworthy, you're allowing the seed work to happen for a Holocaust. So far, 2 Israeli cabinet ministers have called for a nuclear attack on the Gaza Strip. One was serious early on, and one was very recently claiming after the event he didn't really mean it, he was just talking. Thanks to the United States of America, Israel can in fact launch nuclear weapons, and it could in fact use its Jericho system and attack Gaza with nuclear weaponry. This type of final solution is appalling for the world. It should be appalling for everybody, it shouldn't even be mentioned. But even worse, it wouldn't erase Hamas. Such an act would indelibly cause terrorism against Americans, Canadians, British, French and Israelis and Jews for a long time. Wherever we go, wherever we are, wherever we live, the radicalization from a nuclear strike on Gaza by Israel, world safety would be erased. There'd be so many radicalized by such a horrific act, it's unbelievable that anybody would discuss it openly, especially cabinet ministers. 2 of them. To so openly disregard the lives of 2.2 million people as unworthy of survival is unbelievable. It's definitely something the world's experienced before, and we're supposed to never again experience it. People in Canada are calling for a ceasefire, and as I said before, our politicians in the main are hiding.
Gaza Health Ministry says the Palestinian death toll has passed 9,000, including more than 3,600 children killed. This group of doctors say there's a crisis in Gaza.
And I think it's safe to say no one is safe in Gaza. It doesn't matter if you're in a shelter, if you're in a school, if you're in your home, in your hospital.
Much has been said about war crimes, and it's kind of pointless in the Geneva Convention because nobody's going to enforce it. Irregardless, returning civilians to a war zone for no reason at all is an evil act. Israel has committed an evil act in forcibly sending the Palestinian workers in Israel back to the Gaza Strip during a wartime. And the world's press and the world's leaders largely have not condemned that in the West.
At the Kerem Shalom border crossing, these Palestinians make their way into the Gaza Strip. They're some of more than 18,000 Gaza residents who had permits to work in Israel, but whose right to do so was revoked following the Hamas attacks on October the 7th. Among them are some with marks from handcuffs on their wrists and numbered plastic tags on their ankles. They say they were detained, tortured and humiliated by Israeli authorities after the Hamas assault.
We don't know. We don't know, and we can't ask why.
Their accounts are consistent with images leaked on this Telegram thread, which France 24 had access to, and that shows Palestinian workers in Israeli custody.
Ethnic cleansing is also a crime, and we have in the past bombed Yugoslavia and East Timor to stop the stronger, aggressive partner absolutely doing ethnic cleansing. I'm not suggesting we should bomb Israel, but we should morally bomb them if they start ethnic cleansing.
One Israeli government office, the Israeli Ministry of Intelligence, has proposed the permanent transfer of Gaza's 2.3 million residents to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. In a document dated October 14th, the small governmental body stated the forced displacement of Gaza civilians to Egypt would, quote, yield positive and long-term strategic results. It lays out a three-stage process: the establishment of tent cities in Sinai and the opening of a humanitarian corridor, followed by construction of permanent cities in northern Sinai and the creation of a, quote, sterile zone of several kilometers within Egypt, and says, quote, the return of the population to activities, residences near the border with Israel should not be allowed, unquote.
The leaked Israeli draft paper suggests forcibly transferring Gaza's 2.3 million people across this border into the Egyptian Sinai. Egypt's prime minister visited Sinai and said his country will resist.
So I think we have to look at this as what is called a concept paper and understand that it's not a crime that has already occurred.
This Israeli-American historian says while he doesn't support the idea, Israel will make permanent changes in Gaza.
I think it's only natural for them to lose some territory. And that, by the way, is the oldest language, right? When people attack and then the defenders defend, and at the end of the day, if they win, they have the right to seize territory.
The Palestinian representative in Canada says Israel in the document is showing its true colors.
We have Israel, the occupying and apartheid power, deciding the fate of people it occupies, the way it works for its interests, not taking any consideration of their rights, of their desires.
2/3 of Gaza's people are already refugees of previous displacements.
And this would be the same situation. Ethnic cleansing so that Netanyahu could annex Gaza to Israel, as he promised in the map he showed in the United Nations.
In September, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu showed the UN a map he called the New Middle East. It showed an enlarged Israel with Palestinian territories absorbed into it. The draft paper also proposes Canada as a new home for the expelled Palestinians because, it says, Canada has a lenient immigration system.
So is Canada's government responding to this appalling list from the Israeli government? No.
First of all, there's no reason for Palestinians to be displaced, and second of all, that certainly wasn't discussed with us, and that's not the solution.
The Israeli embassy in Canada told us in a written statement, this is a briefing document leaked in its initial stages. It does not represent the Israeli government's position. Asked whether the Israeli government was committed not to expel Gaza's civilian population, the embassy did not respond.
Our news is very selective. Sadly, this week, ethnic cleansing is happening in Pakistan. They're sending generations of people who've lived there back to Afghanistan because there's been some terrorism. A tiny handful of people are causing a large number of people misery. The response won't end the terrorism, but it will cause major problems for the people affected. And again, our government is largely silent.
A crush of trucks at the border. Thousands of Afghan refugees carrying what belongings they can after Pakistan ordered all undocumented foreigners out. Some have lived in Pakistan for decades. I've spent 45 memorable years here, this man says, and now it's over. I've lost my business. What will I do in Afghanistan? I was born here. Pakistan is my home, says 30-year-old Zulfikar Khan. I've been praying for citizenship my whole life. Now he's one of more than 100,000 Afghan migrants who've already returned to a home many, like Khan, don't even know. As the deadline for those without papers to leave voluntarily expired, security forces started rounding people up and taking them to holding centers. A hardline stance from Pakistani officials, despite pleas from rights groups and UN agencies to back down, to avoid a human rights catastrophe.
एक deadline थी illegal aliens के लिए.
Pakistan's interim interior minister promising that those he calls illegal aliens will have to leave. The crackdown mainly affects Afghan migrants and coincides with Pakistan blaming Afghan nationals for a recent spike in militant attacks, a charge Kabul has denied.
Our government is doing literally nothing at all to deal with this. We're not doing anything to force Israel to allow Canadians out of the Gaza Strip. We've been really bad on this one compared to the other nations of the West, and it's continuing to be bad. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not quite sure why we haven't summoned the Israeli ambassador and the Egyptian ambassadors and thrown them out of Canada. We should in fact send what troops we have into the Strip to protect Canadian lives. That's why we have an armed force, to protect Canadian lives. As an aside about the news, it's kind of interesting. They've been interviewing Canadians in Palestine who can't get out, and they are only putting on TV the ones who can't speak any English at all. The parents, the grandparents of people who've come over to Canada years ago, in fact in many cases in the 1950s, and they're not actually showing the majority of Canadians in Palestine who speak Canadian better than I do. It's all a narrative.
It appears that 400 plus Canadians anxious to leave Gaza won't be able to today, despite assurances from the government that could have been the case. That's because the Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt is closed for a second day following a breakdown between parties negotiating to keep it open to let foreign nationals out. This week, more than 1,000 foreign nationals were allowed to leave through that border for the first time since the October 7th attacks. Canadians were not among them.
In the next video, I'm going to get into speculation. I'm going to talk about what's likely going to happen. I'm hoping it's not going to be this. But I'm not seeing any good outcomes here. So I'm going to discuss what the war and confrontation and the spread of the war in various ways it could spread could mean for you and for me. Until then, feel free to share this. YouTube isn't. And good luck, and please, please do not focus on hating Israel or hating Palestine. You cannot hate any people and be okay inside. It's rotting you. Be supportive of anyone who's suffering from violence, regardless of why the person causing the violence felt it was okay to do it. Violence is terrible. We should not be tolerating it. Our government should not be tolerating it, and yet it is. That's it. Have a great day. Doodles. This video has been brought to you by Wolfie Terrier Productions 2023. Wolfie knows nothing about the Gaza conflict and doesn't want to. He's concerned about his lack of treats.